Hey everybody, Tactic Angel here, playing some World of Warships Legends on the PlayStation 4. Today we're going to be talking about this, the grand old lady, HMS Warspite, the most decorated ship in Royal Navy history. In spite of its different appearance, HMS Warspite is a Queen Elizabeth class battleship. Laid down in 1912 and launched in November 1913, the Warspite was just in time for the First World War, but not before running aground and accidentally ramming several other ships. The Warspite took part in the largest fleet engagement of that conflict too, the Battle of Jutland. Left behind by Beatty's battle cruisers, the Warspite, with the battleship group along with it, tried to play catch-up during the initial engagement. Warspite took a hit in her back quarter, jamming her rudder. Rather than trying to slow down or reverse, the Warspite did a couple of circles, and during that time strayed into point-blank range and suffered withering fire. Though inconvenient and certainly dangerous to the crew of HMS Warspite, this did allow the wounded cruiser Warrior to limp away from the pursuing German ships. Though at the height of her military capability, Warspite did not have many other noteworthy successes during World War I. Between wars, the ship underwent several upgrades. Her tower was completely rebuilt, torpedo tubes were removed, and a hangar for spotter aircraft added. And it is in this condition that she entered World War II, and it is in this condition that we see her in World of Warships. The list of things that the Warspite did during World War II is pretty impressive, as is the sheer amount of punishment she took. That list includes, but is definitely not limited to, sinking a U-boat with its spotter aircraft, somehow, at the Battle of Calabria, fending off the Julio Cesare and scoring the longest battleship-to-battleship hit in history, Cape Matapan later, where it helped cripple the Italian fleet in the Mediterranean. It survived a Fritz X early guided bomb. After partial repairs, leaving its number 3 turret permanently jammed in place, she fired the first salvos at Normandy, where she expended all of her rounds, returned to Britain to be resupplied, and then returned to Normandy, where she expended all of her rounds yet again, and then participated in several more shore bombardment missions before the end of the war. After the war, there was some discussion about turning her into a museum ship. However, in what can only be described as one of the great injustices in naval history, it was later decided instead to scrap her. That said, the Warspite did not go quietly into that night. While being towed towards her ultimate fate, she broke free of the tugs and ran aground. Several salvage attempts were made, but she budged only a few hundred yards and came to a final resting place, and sadly later she was broken apart. So we're going to start with survivability like always. The Warspite starts out with 1,800 less hit points than the Queen Elizabeth. That means that it's getting a lower rating here. There is one sort of interesting thing about the Warspite though. It has a slightly better heal. As we look at the repair party, you can see it repairs around 322 hit points per second. I do not think that is being modified by my commander, though it should be. This is around 50 or 60 more than you could expect per second than the Queen Elizabeth. The other stats on the screen here are the same. However, I do get the sense that the Warspite's armor layout is considerably different than the Queen Elizabeth, not the least of which is that the two ships aren't exactly shaped the same way. I find in running away, which, I'm known to do, I take a lot of damage when taking shots in my rear quarter. So make of that what you will. In terms of main battery, there's a lot of things on this screen that are very similar, and there are several things on this screen that are different. The guns, you would say, are the same. They both have 8 381mm 42 Mark I guns in 4 turrets. That said, the HE shell on the Warspite does about 1,000 less damage and has a ever so slightly smaller fire chance than the Queen Elizabeth. The AP for both shells does the same amount of damage. There's nothing on here to indicate what the penetrative power of those shells are, but I get a sense that the Warspite has a little bit more punch in its AP than the Queen Elizabeth. In terms of secondaries, They have very different suites of secondaries, and they have it at different ranges. The Queen Elizabeth ends up with 10 times 2 114mm guns. They shoot out to 4 kilometers normally. The Warspite has 4x2 108mm cannons that fire to 5 kilometers, as well as 8 152mm cannons placed in casements. Overall, I would say that the Warspite has a better secondary armament. In terms of anti-aircraft defense, none of this really makes much of a difference. The AA defense of the Warspite is listed as considerably lower than the Queen Elizabeth. That said, the Queen Elizabeth doesn't seem to have any anti-air that shoots beyond 2.5 kilometers, so I'm not sure that you would agree that the Warspite has a worse AA rating when you're shooting down planes as far as 5 kilometers away. These two really start to diverge in terms of their maneuverability. They both travel at 22.5 knots. That said, the Warspite turns on a dime as far as a battleship's concerned. With a 550 meter turn radius, that's 130 meters shorter than the Queen Elizabeth. Their rudder shift times are roughly equivalent, but the Warspite is ever so slightly faster. For concealment, obviously the Warspite has permanent camo, another beautiful camouflage that the Warspite actually wore in reality. If you look at the ranges you're going to be detected at, they are going to be lower than an unpainted Queen Elizabeth, but if you're looking at a Queen Elizabeth with Type 4 camouflage, they are exactly the same. And finally, we come to the battle. We are on Shards, and here we go with the opening smokescreen. Everyone's favorite, the opening smokescreen. I'd complain about it more, but the truth of the matter is, the reason why it took me so long to put out a review for the Warspite was because of the number of games that I just start spotted and immediately get ruined. The Warspite, I think, is a little bit less armored overall than the Queen Elizabeth, even though there's no model viewer that can prove that to me right now, except if you were to go into the PC game. That said, it is still vulnerable to plunging fire from AP shot by other battleships. So if you start out the game spotted and immediately lose half or 30 your hit points, like, you're probably not going to have a lot of fun in this. And that's kind of the reason why I would be a little reticent to really suggest that you buy this ship, at least right now, because I think if they do adjust the spawns, that you're going to see a lot more opportunity with this boat, because you'll at least have some opportunity to avoid immediately getting annihilated. Anyway, we should probably talk about the game we're actually playing. It looks like some people have already taken note of us, or those torpedoes were probably meant for somebody else. At least I hope so. Maybe we can sneak some shells over this ridge. Looks like one got through. 4,000 damage. Okay, I'll take it. And it looks like we're getting some HE shot in at us. HE is going to do a pretty decent amount of damage to you, probably more often than in an American or Japanese ship, just because you are not the most incredibly well-armored battleship out there. The way that I would suggest thinking about playing this ship is try to get in at medium range, maybe even medium close range, not super close, but you want to try to brawl it out. You can use your secondaries to increase the amount of damage that you do, and also your maneuverability is going to give you some advantages over other battleships without that long-range plunging fire vulnerability. Now it looks like that Jarvis is swinging around in front of me. I think my job is really more to pay attention to the New Orleans, but there are a lot of ships around me, and I want to be mindful of where they're at, because this is going to sound stupid because it's obvious, but oh my, I lost both my front guns. That doesn't happen very often. Backing up. you want to be mindful of the things that are around you, because the Warspite does a pretty good job dealing with one-on-one battleship engagements. If it's at medium range, like where we're at right now. I hit that New Mexico pretty hard, and that's not all that hard to do with these guns, particularly when they're sailing broadside to you and apparently not about to do anything about it. The Warspite being not the most incredibly well armored battleship, though, if you start getting more than one person on you, they're probably going to start flanking you. I can't believe I sailed those shots. And then you're not going to be able to tank the damage as well. The excellent maneuverability of this ship is really great for these one-on-one battleship engagements, because you can see I can swing the aft of this ship around pretty nimbly between shots from the New Mexico. Now, there are ways that the New Mexico could choose to fire its guns that would reduce my ability to do that by maybe firing his front two guns and then his rear two guns. But a lot of people like the salvo fire, so, you know, there are advantages and disadvantages. But in this case, you know, I can swing the back half of my ship around. Sometimes I can get my number 3 or number 4 turret around and, you know, get just a little bit extra damage. And you can see we're doing pretty okay. Now we're in 5.3 kilometers, so my secondaries have opened up. And oh my. Those were not the most incredibly well aimed torpedoes, but I do a little juke to the left, kind of like the maneuver that you'd see Steven Seagal do now that he's a giant. But we've managed to dodge, and we're paying attention to the fact that Jervis is still over there. I don't think he has any more torpedoes, and I do think that my teammates ought to be able to take care of him. Either that or my secondaries, which also have him in range. And it looks like we were right to trust our teammates for once. And now we enter the really, really fun game of chasing a battleship around an island in a battleship. I will mention one thing I forgot to mention back in port. The turret rotation on this ship is substantially faster than the turret rotation on the Queen Elizabeth. I think you're looking at 72 seconds versus around 45. That allows you to really take advantage of these close range engagements in a way that, you know, the Queen Elizabeth, which can easily outrun or outturn its guns, can't. And if you get something too close in a QE, you tend to really pay for it. Now, I'm trying to swing my back half around. I'm gambling that I can take out that New Mexico before he shoots me, and in this case I made a good decision. Looks like our sister ship is on the enemy team, way out there in the middle of the ocean. I trust that in a second or two it will be spotted by that cruiser that's on my team. There we go. So we are acquiring the Queen Elizabeth. We get the auto lock on, and here we go. Shells out. You can see, like, the accuracy on this is pretty decent. My gunnery the last couple days has been a little questionable. Looks like we got a citadel and a hit and an incapacitation. That's all good. And then this doesn't look good. Some things are definitely going wrong here. Tactic Angel. Look at the stacks. Look at the stacks. He's slowing down. Oh, this is going to be ugly. I can't show this to you. This is just embarrassing. So we can pretend that those were a little closer than they were, but I missed with all 8 guns, and we're just going to keep going. Keep going with the video. Forget what you've seen. Anyway, it looks like he's back up to full steam. If you look at his stack, smoke's going pretty much straight back. I should have been reading that cue, but I was not. And there you go. Much better. Much better. We take a fire. I am going to probably let the fire burn because the fire burning is something that I can heal. And if there are people who continue to shoot HE at me, I don't want to be stuck on fire several times. Now, you saw there a little bit of that vulnerability. I took a ton of damage there. Most battleships, when they're as broadside as I was right there, we're going to take a ton of damage. And we've lost the front turret. This is super bad time. And I need to get behind this island so that Fuso doesn't shoot me. The other Fuso. It looks like the Fuso in front of me, though, is starting to think probably that he's overextended. And that if I'm presenting this sort of angle, maybe he should be doing other things. Yep, there we go. We see the rest of his turrets start to move around. I'm going to continue to shoot at him. Since I can swing my guns around like that, I'm going to do that. I don't really do a really good job there either. Just imagine, viewer who thinks or knows he has better gunnery than I do, what you could do with this boat in the games where you don't get wrecked upon spawning. I will encourage you to look down at the amount that I can heal with my repair party. It's pretty considerable. I do not think that the perk is working that allows that to increase, because I've tried putting different commanders in and it doesn't seem to be increasing it above 322. Jellicoe does increase the heal the duration by a fraction of a second, so that's an option. But I think it's bugged right now. I'm using my my reticle there to judge against the flat line of the reticle what his direction is, and then raising my guns high enough to actually get them into the body of the ship or the hull, whatever. That Fuso is now in full retreat, and I'm starting to get the sense that maybe he's going to turn his guns back towards me, because I'm sure shooting at that little destroyer seems like a bad use of his time. Not an impressive damage roll there, but we're backing up and we're turning, and we're making sure we have hit points. So we activate our last heal and present the thinnest possible target to our enemy. All right, 5,000 damage. Not too bad. And we should be able to finish this off pretty soon. I was not anticipating this, but it looks like the Fuso has gotten tired of being shot by this destroyer, and through some combination of skill and luck has finished it off while I finish him off. So 136,000 damage. As you can see, my team is going to win this unless I go kill myself on the enemy battleship. So I will save you the minute and a half where I run away. So here we go with the end plate. We're looking at 136,000 damage. We get 344,000 credits before servicing costs. That's a pretty decent amount of money. Some of that is with a credit flag. And we get the high caliber. There you can see me on the top of the list. Hopefully this has been useful for you though. See you guys on the next one.